First things first, I love the X-Men. With Deadpool and Wolverine coming out and us getting our, third or fourth ending for the Fox X-Men universe, I figured it would be a great time to look back on all the past movies and decide which ones I think are the best and the worst. I'll be taking a look at all 7 main X-Men movies, the Wolverine trilogy, the Deadpool movies, the New Mutants, and Deadpool and Wolverine. And as always, if there's anything you want me to rank, let me know in the comments. X-Men 1, the one that started it all. This one is definitely a product of its time, but it also holds up surprisingly well. This movie had a big task of introducing not only all of the main X-Men and the world of mutants as a whole, but really this was the first Marvel movie to kind of explode. Sure, they had Blade and Howard the Duck beforehand, both becoming cult classics in their own right, but X-Men was a smash hit, and for good reason. It does a great job at introducing you to this insane world, mostly through Rogue being introduced to it with you. It never feels like it's throwing too much at you that you can't comprehend, while also giving you enough information to be invested in the world and the story going on. I think a big part of that is the cast, too. I know the MCU gets a lot of praise for their casting, but I think every character in this movie knocks it out of the park. Not a single miss here in my opinion. Sure, James Marsden ended up doing Hop, but he was great as Cyclops. And of course, this movie's the introduction to, in my opinion, some of the most iconic superhero castings out there. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier, and Ian McKellen as Magneto. This film takes itself the right amount of seriously. There's quips and fun scenes here and there, but also knows when to take the drama and the action seriously. This movie is a great jumping off point for the series. It's definitely got a few detractors here and there, and it's a little bit dated, but if you haven't seen it in a while, I think it's worth going back to. I'd put this on A tier. X2, also known as X-Men United. What do you do when you have a box office success of a comic book property? Well, apparently if you're Fox in 2003, you absolutely blow it out of the water with the sequel. I was so excited for this movie as a kid, and I walked out of the theater absolutely blown away. This movie is astounding. The acting is better, especially in the emotional beats. It's more exciting while also having a more meaningful story, mostly revolving around Wolverine trying to understand his past. And of course, having the X-Men team up with the villains of the first movie, which is a really fun idea. The action scenes in this movie are also some of the best out there. The invasion on the school where they get to showcase some of the mutant students, the fight between Wolverine and Lady Deathstrike, and of course the opening scene at the White House with Nightcrawler, which might be one of my favorite comic book movie scenes of all time. This movie brings back the cast from the first, but also brings in Brian Cox as the villain, Alan Cummings as my favorite X-Men, Nightcrawler, and as well as giving extended roles to Pyro and Iceman. This movie is just a blast to watch while also doing a great job at bringing the themes of the X-Men to the forefront. This is not only one of the best movies on this list, but I'd put this in the top 10 superhero movies. This is S tier. X-Men The Last Stand. Alright, listen. Is this a good movie? No. Do I enjoy it?
You bet your sweet bippy I did.
I think this movie's a lot of fun, and I loved it as a kid. It's got some flaws for sure, and quite a few of them. The main one being it just tried to do too much, adapting both the Dark Phoenix storyline and the Gifted storyline. If it had only done one or the other, I think it would have probably been looked back on a lot more fondly. Outside of that though, there's some damn good moments in this movie. The final fight scene with the X-Men along with the newcomers like Beast, Angel, and Kitty Pryde. You also get the payoff with the Iceman and Pyro fight with Bobby finally going into his ice form. And all of Famke Janssen's scenes as Jean in this movie are top notch. One of the best hero to villain transformations in a movie series. She plays the Phoenix so damn well and steals every single scene she's in. This movie's a fun watch, but after getting used to the great emotional moments of the first and especially the second movies, coming into this, their exclusion here is really noticeable and really makes this film feel sort of surface level, even with some great performances and action scenes. I think this movie gets a bit too much hate, but there's definitely a bit there that's understandable. I'd call this one a solid C. X-Men Origins Wolverine. Once again, not a good movie, but that doesn't stop me from turning it on every now and then and enjoying the hell out of it. Of course, with Wolverine being the breakout star of the series, they had to give him a spin-off, which was going to be the first in a series of origin movies, but this was so poorly received, Fox was just like, never mind. And I have to say, Hugh Jackman is definitely not the problem here. I think he did a good job in this, he hasn't had a single miss in the role. But this is a great character, played by a great actor in a bad movie. Some highlights of the movie, Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth, the opening montage of him and Wolverine fighting through a bunch of wars, that's fantastic. Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool in the first half of the movie is fun, but I think we all know how that turned out by the end. Gambit's live action debut, while I didn't love the actor for it, I love the character and it's exciting to see him in live action. Some other fun cameos here and there, and the action scenes, while not super memorable, had some fun parts. The cons, basically everything else. The effects in this movie are awful for some reason, especially on Logan's claws, and this is the 4th time they've done this, so why is it so much worse than this? There's so many like dumb cliches in this movie too. You know, you've got him walking away from an explosion without looking back. There's 2 different scenes where he just looks up in the sky and screams, "No!" Oh my god. There's the monologue where his girlfriend tells him a legend about a Wolverine, which, you know, is where he gets his nickname, but in the story she talks about it howling at the moon. Wolverines aren't wolves, dude. And of course, there's the Deadpool of it all. Going from an alright adaptation of the character to just complete character assassination. This movie's D tier. X-Men First Class. I think First Class is kind of a mixed bag for me. There's some really great things in this movie. You know, pretty much anything to do with Charles and Eric is fantastic. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender really carry the film. I also think Nicholas Hoult did a good job with Beast, but was better in basically every other movie he was in, and I think I can say the same for Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. Honestly though, this was such a strange group of mutants to be the First Class too. Outside of Beast, none of the other characters are really like well-known X-Men, but I do think the new characters were fun and well acted, just not who you'd expect as the First Class, you know? I think Kevin Bacon was alright as Sebastian Shaw, but they somehow biffed Emma Frost twice, 2 movies in a row. You know, there's definitely some weird choices here that I didn't really gel with, but all in all, I think this is a good prequel and it's a fun watch with some great character work from the 2 leads. I'd be comfortable putting this one on A. The Wolverine. You know, as a middle child, I resonate with this movie because this is the most like middle child movie in a trilogy that I can think of. It gets overlooked due to the low lows of the first movie and the high highs of the third. But I think this movie has some really great moments and ideas going on. The opening scene with the atomic bomb is really memorable and was a bold way to start the movie. I also think finally getting Wolverine in Japan was great too. You know, the scenes with him fighting the Yakuza and the ninjas, those are real highlights in this, especially the bullet train sequence. Speaking of which, the little like fake out jump he does on top of the train is one of the funniest moments outside of Deadpool in any of these movies. And having a Logan without his healing factor was really a great way to subvert our expectations for the character that we've seen so many times already and actually, you know, get a sense of danger that we haven't gotten yet for the character. And although the action scenes are exciting and the set pieces are fantastic, the plot is sort of rigid. A lot of it just seems to come down to like misunderstandings, basically between Logan and the old man he saved. Like this is one of those storylines where they could have solved it with a conversation, but that would not have been a very fun superhero movie to watch. So I get it. I think I'd toss this one on B. Days of Future Past. This movie was so exciting to me when it first came out. You know, merging the original timelines with the First Class timeline, I was absolutely stoked for this. And honestly, I think my expectations were surpassed by the time I walked out of the theater. The choice to send back Wolverine to interact with the new cast was a great idea. The interactions between Logan and the past version of his team are just fantastic. You know, and that was basically the hook of this movie, but it took it and absolutely ran with it. All of the scenes in the future with the OG team facing off against the new Sentinels are some of the most brutal scenes in the series, at least for, you know, the PG-13 ones. And even in the past, we got some great scenes like the prison break from Quicksilver, which is one of the best speedster scenes I can think of. And then the final battle against Magneto was great too. The ending for this movie retconning some of the less good ones was a nice touch as well. This movie's great, and I feel like it's pretty underrated when it comes to the X-Men series. You know, like if you're an X-Men fan, you're probably like, oh hell yeah, Days of Future Past, but I feel like most casual fans are kind of like, oh yeah, that was a movie. But honestly, this is the best of the prequel movies, and I'd say one of the best in the entire series. I'd throw this on S tier. Deadpool. This movie should not be as good as it is. You know, it's about an at the time C-list character who was already portrayed in one of the worst X-Men movies, but damn, I love this movie. This is literally a laugh-a-minute type movie, but almost all of the jokes land even 8 years later. But it also knows when to be serious and when to be a spectacle when it comes to the action scenes. And with the fourth wall breaking and self-referencing, it really sets itself apart from other superhero movies at the time. And the story here, while not being like an end-of-the-world stakes type superhero movie, has enough stakes for the characters themselves that you can't help but stay interested through the whole thing. This movie is great and exactly what it needed to be to introduce this character and make him the household name he is today. I think the first Deadpool is S tier. X-Men Apocalypse. If I had to sum up this movie, I'd say it's a bit of a letdown with some really good moments. Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse should have been a home run, but he felt kind of wasted here. And honestly, there's pieces of this movie that I found to be sort of slow and boring. But there is some great stuff here too. The scene with Magneto in the forest is one of the best Magneto scenes in the entire series. Quicksilver's big scene, while not being as great as the one in Days of Future Past, was still super entertaining. And then Wolverine's cameo was great, and one of the only times we get to see him as like an absolute animal. But all in all, I'd say this movie is mostly a bit forgettable outside of some great standout moments. So I think this one would sit firmly on B tier. Logan. I think Logan is the quintessential way to send off a character like Wolverine. It gave him one last epic hurrah while also being a great character study of someone you've watched for 20-something years in the role. Hugh Jackman brought his A-game here along with Patrick Stewart, who gave what I would say was one of the best performances of his career. This movie is exciting, depressing, and manages to just somehow hit like every feeling in its runtime. Daphne Keane really steals the show as Laura somehow, while acting next to these characters you've watched for the whole series, played by seasoned actors. I have just absolutely nothing bad to say about this movie. While I think there are some great movies on this list, I think Logan is pretty damn close to perfect. Not only the best X-Men movie, but one of the best movies in the entire superhero genre. I'm putting this above S tier. Is that allowed? Who cares? This is my list. This is in a league of its own. Logan is Logan tier. Deadpool 2. They really could have done like anything with this movie after the smash hit the first one became, but they decided to take this hilarious character and put him through the ringer and give him, a great emotional arc. Even with a bigger budget and a larger fan base, they really went in on the character here, and I think that was a great choice. Sure, there's bigger action scenes, more big fun moments, and it's still absolutely hilarious at times, but the emotional beats in this movie are just so much better than the first. They say during the movie that it's a family movie, and at its core, it really is. I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty sure I teared up on my first viewing during the ending of this one, which I never would have expected from a Deadpool movie. I do think the first one is all around better, and this one at times feels like a bit of a retread, but it's fun, it's exciting, and it's got a great emotional core to it. I'd throw this one on A tier. Dark Phoenix. Even though this wasn't technically the last movie in the series, it was definitely the nail in the coffin. This movie is just so incredibly forgettable, which is crazy considering it's another go at the Phoenix storyline, one of the biggest X-Men plots there is, and it kills off some characters that you've been watching the whole time. But this movie is just messy and boring throughout pretty much the entire thing. The only scene I remember even liking throughout this movie is the fight scene on the train, especially the bit with Nightcrawler. Everything else I basically blocked out of my memory and had to go back and rewatch just for this list, and I kind of wish I didn't have to. Even with like Origins and Last Stand, I can go back and watch them and enjoy lots of it. But this movie is just kind of a chore to watch. This is the worst X-Men movie, and I think I hated it. Outside of that one scene, but I think I just love Nightcrawler. Alright, you know the drill. Skip D, straight to F. New Mutants. So this is how the X-Men ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper. This is nowhere near as bad as Dark Phoenix, but it's pretty underwhelming on its own. It's not like abysmal by any means, but it's not one that I would call very good either. I like that they really branched out here and tried to make like a horror movie with mutants, but it feels like a bit of a miss at times. While it is definitely a different approach to superhero movies and kind of interesting at times, there's other times where it just gets so boring. The cast and the characters they play are definitely the best part of this movie, and it sucks that it's probably the only time we're going to see these interpretations, because I feel like these characters in a different movie would work pretty well. But this is the type of movie where you watch it once, you go, huh, okay, and then never think about it again. Solid C tier. Deadpool and Wolverine. So I'm not going to spoil it for anyone. I know it's still in theaters and spoilers are probably all over YouTube and TikTok, but just to be safe, I'm not going to spoil anything here. But I will say if you're a fan of the X-Men in any sort of way, go see this movie. It is an absolute love letter to not only the X-Men series, but so much more just in the realm of Marvel and superhero movies. I think I spent probably 98% of this movie just smiling or laughing, and the other 2% with my jaw on the floor from some of the most absolutely insane cameos you could possibly imagine. I will say, I think the only somewhat disappointing piece of the movie for me was the villain, Cassandra Nova. I liked the actress, but she felt just a little one-dimensional throughout this. But everything else here makes up for it in spades. It's hilarious, the action scenes are great, So many fan service moments, but they more than earn them by the end, and it's got plenty of heart just like the other two. I don't think I've enjoyed a movie this much in the theaters in years. I could not tell you the last time I spent an entire movie just smiling. I've liked most MCU movies since Endgame, and some I've even loved like Guardians 3 and Shang-Chi. It could be recency bias, or just the fact that I've loved some of these characters for like 20 years, but this movie just felt different and I loved every second of it. I'm gonna throw it on S tier. And there you have it, my list of all the X-Men movies. Like I've said a few times, I grew up on these and I love most of these movies in one way or another. And after watching Deadpool and Wolverine, I'm really excited to see where Marvel goes with the characters next. Whether it's legacy characters or new actors filling the roles. As long as there's mutants on my screen, I'll be pretty damn stoked about it. Let me know what you want me to rank next and subscribe to stay up to date on the rankings. Thanks for watching.